Hello everyone and welcome to today's research seminar brought to you by the Department of English and Communication at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Today's speaker is Professor Catherine Nickerson of Zayed University in the UAE. Professor Nickerson's current research interests include English as a business lingua franca, the integration of mobile learning into the English language classroom, and the communication of corporate social responsibility. Her latest book is entitled Teaching Business Discourse with Palgrave Macmillan. Across her career, she has received numerous awards, including the Association for Business Communication's Distinguished Communication Award 2009 and the Outstanding Article Award from the Business and Professional Communication Quarterly. I can certainly say whenever I've come across Professor Nickerson's work, it has always, not only does she look at very interesting stuff, she always has something very interesting to say. So we were very happy when she accepted our invite. Without further ado, I will hand over the floor to Professor Nickerson.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jamie, for that wonderful introduction. I'm Catherine, rather than being Professor Nickerson, but I am Catherine Nickerson, and I'm at Zayed University in the United Arab Emirates. And today, as Jamie said, I'm going to talk to you about best practices in online teaching and the development of students' digital communication skills. I've been at Zayed University for 13 years now, and before that I worked in India for a few years, and before that I worked at the Arab University in Nijmegen, also for 13 years. So I have a slightly symmetrical career, it seems. I work at one of 3 federal universities in the UAE, and that's important because we serve the needs of Emirati nationals within federal universities. On the screen here, you can see my university. The Dubai campus is here on the left, that's where I'm based, and the Abu Dhabi campus is here on the right. And although we have 2 campuses, we're one university, there's about an hour and a half between the 2, but we teach the same programs across both campuses. We were originally a women's university, and you can see some of our students here on the walkway on the left. I give that to you as a little bit of background because we are primarily teaching pre-experienced students, so students that have no knowledge of the workplace, and that will be relevant for what I'm going to go on to say. Little bit of background on the department that I am in. And specifically our teaching and learning activities. When I first joined the university, I was in the business communication department in the College of Business. And then about 3 years ago, all of us that were involved with service teaching across the university were gathered together into the language studies department, and we're now part of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Just a few examples of the sorts of things that we have done. Nice study pre-COVID where we looked at the impact of mobile learning on our students' performance and also students' attitudes. So mobile learning was actually quite new at that time. And what we did was we looked at different groups of students, some that were being taught through mobile learning, some that were being taught through other forms of project-based learning, and then others that were being taught traditionally. And we found that it impacted both their attitudes to being in the classroom if we use mobile learning, and also their performance as well. So, which was a good thing given what happened 3 years after the study was published. Another study I was part of, I'm part of the et al. On Albers et al. 2020. We looked at what textbooks told us about teaching digital communication. And we also looked at what the research told us about teaching digital communication. And we found that there was quite a difference between those 2 things. So again, this was some initial work where we tried to break open those boundaries of the textbook and create assessments that we thought were more suitable for students in developing those skills that they would need on entering the workplace. And the last one is by my colleague Xinxing Quinn, who some of you may know. Xinxing is an expert on second language acquisition, and she currently has a grant to look at the effects of digital multimodal composition on students' writing developments. So I would urge you to look out for that. That looks like very promising research. So this is the sort of thing that we're working on. I'd first like to introduce you to my co-author, Peter Davison, who is also at Zayed University with me. Peter is a research active practitioner specializing in assessment and feedback. He mostly teaches technical communication, and my background, as many of you may know, has been in business communication, but a lot of what I'll be talking about has been collaborative work together with Peter. So the field of business discourse has been pretty much well established now for a number of decades, and we know quite a lot of information about how business people around the world use talk or writing in commercial organizations in order to get their work done. And this is a quotation from a book volume that I co-authored with Francesca Bargiella and Brigitte Planken, originally in 2007, and then we updated it for its second edition in 2013. And what we were trying to do was to find out what it was to make a connection between when people were using business English and the kinds of business transactions that they needed to carry out. So the research that falls into this tradition has allowed us to identify many of the skills that students of business and other forms of professional education in higher educational settings will need once they enter the workforce. And it's helped, therefore, in starting to define a set of best practices for improving students' written and communication skills. And I have a few examples of what that research has told us. First of all, we know that business is a collaborative activity, and it's increasingly enabled through digital media like email and messaging. We also know that people who are effective communicators in business contexts and other professional contexts do not necessarily use correct grammar or vocabulary, but they somehow seem to be able to communicate their message. And the very rich research stream that's come out of business English as a lingua franca has shown this over and over again. Business people use chains or networks of communication activities. So we talk about intertextuality and interdiscursivity to facilitate that process of business and carrying out business transactions. And this type of communication is highly contextualized. It relies on relationships between people, the establishment of relationships, or the maintenance of relationships related to specific business transactions. The implications for people in learning are that we actually know quite a lot about the skills that people are required, that people need to communicate effectively. We know that in general, communication is contextual, it's intertextual, and it is collaborative. We know when we look at textbooks that these often look at single instances of a particular communicative genre, like an email, and it tends to focus on the surface details. So textbooks generally don't look at intertextuality or interdiscursivity, for instance, and these are something that people need to be aware of and students need to learn about. Zhang, writing in 2013, has recommended that we need to shift our emphasis from language towards students developing a knowledge of the business world and students developing a knowledge of the communication skills that they will need within the business world as well. So in my previous work, so a publication from last year, 2022, I've noted that much still remains to be done in finding ways in which we can help students to practice and develop the skills that they will need for the workplace in a relevant way within the classroom. Most especially if we consider the changes that have taken place in workplace communication more generally as a result of the COVID pandemic. Here's a historical slide. I've been talking about this, it seems, for more than 2 decades, but we still don't seem to be very good at it. So I talked about it first in this co-edited collection of chapters from 1999 that I co-edited with Martin Hewings, who was then at Birmingham University. And in 2005, when I was a guest editor for a special issue in ESPJ of English for Specific Business Purposes, I said research reporting with a specific focus on the teaching of ESCP remains sparse. Clarice Chan, who I know is well known to many of you here, 12 years later, also talked about the paucity of such research when she looked at the skills that experienced business people needed to develop in the course of their careers. So in projects like the one I'm talking about today with Peter, what we're trying to do is to strengthen the link between research and pedagogical practice. And I'll talk more about that at the end of my presentation. So in this presentation, I'll discuss how the effective online teaching of a professional communication course can also provide students who have little or no work experience with a means of developing the digital communication skills they will eventually need for the workplace. In doing so, I will discuss the different sets of digital skills that scholars have identified already as crucial for professional people if they are to succeed as communicators. And I will also show how developing these skills can be incorporated into an online professional communication course which follows best practices in teaching. An important part of my discussion will be to demonstrate how the COVID crisis has led to an increasing focus on the need for effective digital communication skills across numerous professional contexts, as well as to the rapid adoption and continuing deployment of online resources in academia. My intention will be to show how these parallel developments are going to change the way the world of work communicates and the way that we teach, and therefore the priorities that I think we need to set. I'll illustrate my arguments with examples taken from my own experience working in a multinational, multicultural context of the UAE. So on that note, I will show you one of my favourite slides, which if any of you have heard me speak before, you may have seen it. And this is the development of the city of Dubai over the last 30 years. If any of you have visited Dubai, you may recognise this as being Sheikh Zayed Road, which is the main thoroughfare that cuts down the coast across the city. We can see 1990, a desert track, going through to the present day on the right-hand side where we see the city as it is now, and the shadow of the Burj Khalifa, which is still currently the tallest building in the world. The serious part to this slide is that the enormous progress that has taken place over the last 30 years has also had a huge impact on the local community, and most especially on the young people within the local community. If you're not familiar with the Gulf region, you may not know that with the exception of Saudi Arabia, the local populations across the Gulf tend to be very small relative to the expat populations. So in the UAE, although the population shifts around a little bit, the local population accounts generally for between 10 and 15% of the population, and 85% is made up of people like me, so the rest of the expat community. This has impacted employability, and this is of course a major concern for many institutions around the world. The young Emiratis have traditionally moved into the public sector to work for government organisations or semi-governmental organisations, and that's now widely acknowledged to be saturated. And so one of the things that we are attempting to do at CU is to graduate students who can then enter the private sector in order to impact our employability figures. Almost all of our students are first language Arabic speakers, and Arabic remains the language of the home. There may be a few who speak other languages as their first language, but most of them are first language Arabic speakers. It's then very difficult to decide, at least in terms of cat-truths, World English circles, whether they fit into second language speakers, foreign language speakers, or neo-natives. There tends to be a very large section of proficiency in English language, and it's also worth noting that outside the home, English is often used as a lingua franca. The students that I see are all business seniors, they're all undergraduates. They account for various disciplines and the normal business disciplines. And most of them have the capacity to achieve most goals and express themselves on a range of different topics. However, it should be said that their speaking skills far outstrip their writing skills. They are almost all pre-experienced learners as well, meaning that they have none or very little knowledge of business. So this is typical of the sort of writing that we get, an initial writing exercise for them to try and set up an internship opportunity. This would be, I guess, in about the first semester of the second year of their undergraduate course. We have a transcription of that, so you don't have to try and read the handwriting. So you can see that there are obvious surface feature difficulties here, but also problems with the actual content as well. And it's our job to take a student like this, and within the next 2.5 years, to create a communicator who is able to enter the private sector and communicate effectively both in Arabic and in English. I think this in general is also part of a trend in higher education. So there's concern with transferable skills. There's concern with increasing levels of employability for younger people. I was at a research seminar last week where Anna Kankaranta was there from Aalto University in Helsinki, and she was talking about enabling skills for her postgraduate students. We see many universities bringing in a parallel program to their bachelor's degrees in work integrated learning as well, again, because of this concern with employability. My own university 2 years ago brought in a whole set of interdisciplinary programs together with a work integrated learning program. I was at the Association for Business Communication conference in Tampa, Florida last October, and Tempura University of Applied Sciences in Finland was talking about something very similar. And colleagues of mine visited Sabancı University in Istanbul in Turkey 2 weeks ago, and Sabancı University has a very well-developed community outreach program that is mandatory for all of their students to follow. And again, its intention is to help students to develop enabling skills. As many studies have noted, more or less 3 years ago to the day, higher education institutions across the globe had a matter of days in which to switch all of their classes to an online format, or rather to what can best be described as an emergency remote teaching mode. It wasn't really fully fledged online learning. It was, okay, we are in an emergency situation. We had 2 weeks to do that in the UAE. I imagine it was similar wherever you are in the world. Faculty and students had to suddenly hone their digital communication skills in order to facilitate and attend class through various digital platforms. In addition, as many parts of the world went into a strict lockdown, business and industry also went digital overnight, with an increasing reliance on email messaging for written communication and on Teams, WebEx and Zoom for meetings and negotiations. Furthermore, although the crisis started to abate in many parts of the world in spring of 2022, and the world started to return to some semblance of normality, it's become increasingly clear that this reliance on digital communication skills will continue both in professional contexts and in academia. Online and blended classes are now increasingly the norm in higher education, even in contexts like ours in the UAE, where we had, until that time, maintained a very traditional face-to-face medium as our mode of delivery up until 2020. We also see the persistence of virtual meetings like this one today, and other forms of digital communication, both in academia and elsewhere. 2 years on from the beginning of the crisis, we consequently find ourselves in a situation where the skills our students need to excel in the classroom are progressively similar to those that they will need to communicate effectively in their professional life. It provides us with an unprecedented opportunity to refocus on teaching in order to improve our students' written and oral digital communication skills. A number of studies have already identified the types of digital skills that people need in order to communicate effectively in the workplace. So Darrix and Gatti, writing in 2019, just before the pandemic, note the collaborative, collegial nature of effective digital business transactions. Albers and also one of the studies I was involved with, report that authentic emails are often characterized by intertextuality, informality, and linguistic inaccuracy. Julio Jimenez, writing in 2014 in the English for Specific Purposes Journal, and I highly recommend his work to you if you're interested in digital communication, looked at computer-mediated communication in business and industry in the United Kingdom. Found that people, even at that time, needed to multitask very quickly when they were communicating, as well as being able to understand how to combine different media effectively and simultaneously, and use different media with different audiences. Findings like these from the fields of business communication and business discourse provide an indication as to where the focus should be in the topics discussed and the materials included in online education to provide students with an opportunity to develop the skills that they will need on entering the workforce. At the same time, if we look at other fields, researchers with an interest in online teaching and learning, for instance, have noted the need to refocus on learning design in online teaching post-COVID to take students' existing digital skills into account, as well as constructing a teacher present as a facilitator, not an instructor, and providing students with assessment opportunities that allow them to become responsible for their own learning and to increase their autonomy. Other scholars in this field remind us that we need to consider how visible the technology is to our students. So how familiar are they already with a particular online resource? And very recent research from Sormanen et al. From last year reports on the positive effects of using digital technologies across a range of different disciplines, and notes in particular that an increase in the use of digital technologies in the classroom can also lead to an increase in students' collaborative skills. And I'm just going to switch back to the previous slide. If we look at Darrix and Gatti here, telling us that effective communicators in the workplace need collaborative skills. Davidson and Buchanan combine the insights from the fields of business discourse and education technologies and suggest the following. In an online learning environment where students may already feel remote and disengaged, effective online teaching needs to engage students by utilizing varied methods, materials, interactive activities, and technologies. It also needs to provide students with opportunities to engage in real-world communicative tasks, which require them to produce the types of authentic written and oral outputs that are characteristic of the workplace, such as email and messaging and other forms of digital communication. Students in an online class also need frequent opportunities to work together on these tasks in pairs and groups to develop the collaborative skills and collegiality that typifies digital professional communication. and they also need to be provided with regular peer and teacher feedback to allow them to evaluate their existing skills and then to build on them. Davidson and Buchanan also echo the need to provide authentic assessment opportunities, such as group research projects, scenario-based projects, case studies, simulations, and group presentations, which students take responsibility for their own learning as a result of completing the assessment. These key principles of effective online teaching and learning can therefore be used to provide a scaffolding for the specific sets of skills that we know our students will need once they enter the workforce. Giving feedback to students on their written and spoken assignments is one of the most effective ways for students to learn and improve on their communication skills. Peter has worked a lot on this, and even though the process of giving feedback to individual students can be very time-consuming, it's certainly worth investing time in for online communication courses. Teacher feedback on students' work is the most common type of feedback, and research suggests that students both want this type of feedback and value it as well. Giving feedback, however, needs to be a carefully considered activity if the student is to benefit from the experience and incorporate it in a positive way into the development of their skills. Peter points out that the effectiveness of teacher feedback depends upon a number of variables, as we can see on this slide, such as who is giving the feedback, what form does the feedback take, what does the feedback focus on, when is the feedback given, the quality and quantity of the feedback, and whether or not students understand the feedback they are given and are ready and willing to accept and attend to it. Teacher feedback given in this way allows us to develop a relationship with our students in an online or blended mode of delivery, and it helps to keep students engaged. More importantly, it also helps students to become familiar with the type of feedback process exemplified by the 360-degree feedback reviews, which is an established feature of the workplace. In addition to teacher feedback, peer feedback can also be used in an online classroom and can help in developing a relevant set of skills. For instance, engaging in this process helps students to develop the collaborative and collegial skills that we know are a hallmark of digital workplace communication. We also know it will help their skills in multitasking and considering how best to package the information for an audience. We also know it will help their ability to build relationships and to negotiate with each other. And finally, drawing on Helen Spencer-Oatey's work here, it will also help them to manage rapport in intercultural communication. And that is especially important for our students in Dubai, as they will be entering a workforce where there are more than 220 different cultures represented. Peter and his colleagues have identified a number of key factors that teachers need to address in order for peer feedback to be effective. The process needs to be formalised and have clear guidelines and procedures, much as it would have in a workplace setting. There need to be clear expectations and an opportunity for the peers to develop trust. Students need to be trained in how to give and receive feedback. And there needs to be a focus for the feedback, such as a checklist or a rubric, again, in a parallel to the workplace situation. The feedback needs to be monitored, and the feedback givers also need to be given feedback on the quality of the feedback that they're giving. If we connect what business discourse research has said about how successful people communicate in the workplace with best practices in giving and receiving feedback, we can see this also provides them with useful and transferable skills to take beyond the classroom and into their careers. One of the last things I want to talk about today is scenario-based assessment, or SBA, which engages students in real-life performance tasks in a situated context or scenario, and I'm drawing on Dean and Sparks from 2019 here. One of the key aspects of SBA in business settings is that the scenario replicates an authentic real-world test that students would likely be expected to perform in the workplace. For example, this could involve students writing a text message, participating in a meeting, developing a business plan, writing a press release, or working with a team to write a proposal. And I'm referring here to Zhang's work from 1917, which I would also very much recommend to you. He has noted that engaging in and understanding these different kinds of communicative genres that a particular community uses and developing an effective set of socialization skills in doing so is a crucial part of developing the skills that students need if they are to become successful members of a particular professional community and to start developing a professional identity. This slide shows some of the underlying skills that students can develop as a result of using SBA and the research that has identified these skills in the workplace. We can see Stephen Brenwer's work on teams, power relations and collaboration again. My own work with Cornelia Ely and Brigitte Plankin that has identified an organizational discourse that negotiations, relationship building, decision making and problem solving are also all key to successful communication. And Zhang himself talking about SBA as an important form of participatory learning that can lead to the development of appropriate socialization skills. A recent development in SBA is to have a number of tasks that are thematically linked. For business students, this is particularly effective as it provides them with an opportunity to experience that intertextuality and interdiscursivity that we know is a common feature of communication in business contexts and the way that different genres are networked and linked together. This slide shows an example of a thematically linked scenario-based that we recently developed and implemented. It has 5 different thematically linked components, and it was based on the theme of remote working in the post-pandemic workplace, which we knew would be familiar to our students and something that they would be able to understand. The COVID-19 crisis in March 2020 caused a major worldwide disruption in education as teaching was abruptly moved online for many teachers and students with little or no advanced planning. Even as the majority of tertiary education classes have started to return to face-to-face teaching on campus, many of us have recognised that integrating elements of effective online or blended learning into our classes can offer improved access and flexibility for our students and help to enhance their digital skills. I believe that the transferable skills I've talked about today are of relevance because many of us are involved with students who have limited workplace experience. My hope is that this will have given you some ideas on how to translate our research findings into relevant classroom practice. Here are a few ideas for further research. I think we will need to look at what we think will happen in the next 5 to 10 years within the workplace. We've undergone something of a seismic shift as a result of the COVID pandemic, but we need to look into the future and see how we need to prepare our students to adapt to new changes. We need to identify the core skills and competencies that our students will need to acquire in order to work effectively in an increasingly remote working environment. And we need to design new assessment task types that we can utilize in an online learning environment that will help students to develop the skills they will need. And I do believe that we need to look for new research-based materials, which are still relatively few and far between, that we can use together with commercially produced textbooks, which tend to be quite static and not interactive in the materials that they present. And I've also written here ChatGPT, which I'm sure will also become of great importance for us in a few years. Finally, before I stop talking, a very shameless plug for a forthcoming, very special issue of ESPJ. So 20 years after the last time I guest edited for ESPJ, I'm working on another special issue together with Clarice Chan. And again, we're on the theme of business English and translating research into practice. But it's a little bit different this time. It's a slightly different format than you might be familiar with a special issue. What we wanted to do in this special issue was to make research more accessible to practitioners. Over the years, I've heard many practitioners talk about the fact that our research tends to be hidden behind a paywall. And we found a very sympathetic ear in Christine, one of the general editors of ESPJ, who has agreed to make this an open access issue so that practitioners and those who do not have access to their own tertiary institution can also look at the research. So that was one thing that we wanted to achieve. The other thing was that we wanted to create a space for practitioners to be able to provide some commentary on our research as well. So what we did was that we selected 10 research articles that had been published in ESPJ from 2005 through to, I think, 2021, which we felt was not an exhaustive list, but one that we hope was representative of the development of the field. And in most cases, we then asked the original writers to go back and reflect on their research, to talk about how impactful they felt that particular research had been, and also to reflect on its theoretical and pedagogical relevance. We then asked a group of experienced practitioners to also take a look at that research and to suggest how it could be used in the classroom, and many of them generated a set of classroom facts as a result. This shows you the different themes that will appear in the special issue. We selected on the left-hand side here a number of research themes that we considered to be very important in the development of the field. So BELF is there at the top of the list, asexuality, CMC, concern with spoken forms of communication, which moves beyond the traditional concerns of ESP. And on the right-hand side, we have those studies which were more to do with the learner or to do with experienced business people and the needs that they had, and also classroom concerns as well. So how can we help people to become a member of a particular professional community? And for my final slide, here are our group of practitioners and our group of researchers who will be contributing to that special issue. Thank you very much. Jamie, that's me done.
Thank you very much.